When the winds of Valheim blew across the icy fjords, everyone knew something great was about to happen. And so it was that 6 legendary warriors rose, forged by steel and storm, known as the Valheim barbarians. Each of them carried not only weapons, but stories as sharp as their blades. There was Ragnar, the strategist who never lost a battle, Sigurd, whose strength could shatter boulders, and Astrid, the shield maiden who fought with the fury of a dragon. Their names echoed through the halls of the Skalds, but their deeds were only just beginning. They were not just warriors, but living legends, each with skills that made them indispensable. Freya, the serene-eyed healer, had the gift of restoring strength to even the most wounded in combat. Haken, the tracker, read the terrain like an open book, finding trails even in the thickest fog. And Bjorn, the weapons craftsman, forged raw iron into deadly masterpieces. United by a common destiny, they were not just a group, but a symbol of resilience and courage, inspiring entire villages to face what once seemed impossible. But there was something beyond their strength and skill, a secret that united them, something that Valheim itself seemed to keep hidden. These 6 Vikings had not come together by chance, and each battle they fought hid layers of mystery and purpose. As their names were chanted in the taverns and their enemies retreated at the echo of their footsteps, an unseen force was driving them toward a destiny they did not yet understand. But the true challenge would begin when the silence of the north was broken. Valheim, a land where the days were long and the nights whispered of the ancient gods, was much more than a place of sweeping landscapes. Its fields were home to tales of blood and glory, where battles shaped the fate of generations. The snow-capped hills saw warriors brave storms to protect their homes. And the treacherous seas. These were battlefields in their own right, where drakars clashed like raging beasts, leaving the ocean stained red. Valheim was a living arena, where only the truly worthy could write their names for eternity. The fight for Valheim was not limited to swords and shields. It was also a battle of spirits. Amidst the icy wastes, entire clans competed for scarce resources, each piece of land fought over as if it were the last. And even in times of peace, challenges remained. Ancient spirits inhabited the dark forests, testing the mettle of those who dared cross their domains. Tales told of warriors who faced unspeakable beasts, monsters that seemed to have come from the depths of creation itself. In Valheim, even silence was a trap, a pause before the next roar. The wars were not only between men, but also against nature itself. Cold, hunger, and darkness formed a deadly alliance, reaping those who underestimated the territory. But for those who survived, the reward was unmatched: the respect of their peers, the protection of their lands, and the chance to be immortalized in sagas that would echo forever. Valheim gave nothing for free, but for those who braved its dangers, the promise was clear: to become part of something greater, something eternal. And yet, there were always more stories to be unraveled in its shadows. Valheim has always been the scene of epic battles and immortal sagas, but few names command as much reverence as the 6 barbarians. The origins of this legendary group are shrouded in a mixture of chance and destiny, as if the gods had shaped their lives to collide at a crucial point in history. Each came from a different corner of Valheim, with paths marked by pain, loss, and triumph. Ragnar, the strategist, was born in a coastal village ravaged by plunder. From a young age, he had to use his wits to survive, learning to anticipate the moves of his enemies. His sharp mind made him a natural leader, capable of turning seemingly impossible situations into glorious victories. Sigurd, on the other hand, grew up in the icy mountains, where survival depended on brute force. It is said that he killed his first bear with his bare hands at the age of 15, a feat that earned him respect and fear in equal measure. Astrid, the shield maiden, came from the plains, where she learned to fight to protect her family from constant raiders. Despite her fierce appearance on the battlefield, Astrid was known for her unwavering loyalty and compassionate heart. Freya, the healer, came from a line of women who mastered the secrets of herbs and potions. Though not a traditional warrior, her ability to save lives was as valuable as a sharp sword. Haken, the tracker, was a loner who found his place in the group by displaying an almost supernatural ability to navigate the densest forests. And finally, Bjorn, the craftsman, whose skill in forging weapons was matched only by his courage on the battlefield. Fate brought the six together at a time of crisis. During an incursion by foreign invaders, the villages of Ragnar, Astrid, and Freya were attacked simultaneously. Separately, they stood no chance against such a powerful enemy. It was Ragnar who realized that their only hope lay in unity. He gathered those who could fight and organized a masterful ambush that turned the tide of the battle. During this battle, Astrid distinguished herself by leading the charge that crushed the enemy flank, while Freya saved dozens of lives with her healing. Sigurd arrived later, drawn by rumors of a group resisting the invaders. He brought Haken and Bjorn with him, forming what would later be known as the Six Barbarians. The name came not from their savagery, but from their ability to inspire fear in their enemies. In one of their most famous battles, they faced an army 3 times their size. Ragnar devised a bold strategy, using the terrain to his advantage. Haken led the group through a treacherous forest to attack from the rear, while Bjorn, with his forged weapons, ensured that every blow was lethal. Sigurd led the front line, clearing a path like an avalanche, and Astrid commanded the defense, ensuring that no enemy could break through. Freya, always in the thick of the battle, moved like a shadow, tending to the wounded and keeping the others on their feet. When the dust settled, the field was silent, and the few survivors whispered of the barbarians who had turned the tide of war. Over the years, the 6 barbarians faced challenges that tested not only their skills, but also their bonds. On one occasion, they had to protect a village from an attack by Draugrs, undead warriors who haunted the forests. It was an intense battle, where each had to overcome their deepest fears. Bjorn, who had always trusted metal more than magic, faced his first fight against the unknown. Freya, meanwhile, discovered an ancient ritual that could seal the Draugrs back to the earth. This battle became a turning point, reinforcing that their strength came from their diversity of talents and their mutual trust. But it wasn't all war and conflict. The moments of peace also helped shape their legend. Between battles, they became protectors of Valheim, helping to rebuild villages and teaching the young how to defend themselves. Bjorn built a forge that became legendary, attracting warriors from faraway lands. Freya shared her knowledge with local healers, while Haken taught hunters to read the signs of nature. Ragnar and Astrid, on the other hand, took on the role of mentor, passing on their strategies and tactics to the next generation. These quiet moments showed that their true strength lay not only in their weapons, but in the lasting impact they left in their wake. The legend of the 6 barbarians continued to grow, but something seemed to lurk. Even in times of peace, there were whispers of a growing threat, one that would test the group as never before. Fate, bringing them together in a time of crisis, seemed to be setting the stage for yet another tale that would be sung for generations. But it was a saga that had yet to be told. Brynolf the Skullbreaker was more than a name whispered fearfully around campfires. He was a force of nature, a storm in human form. From a young age, he demonstrated an insatiable appetite for war. It was said that his first enemy was a giant wolf that threatened his village, a beast he defeated with nothing more than a blunt axe and a determination that frightened even the most seasoned. This feat marked the beginning of a legend. Brynolf did more than protect his people. He built his reputation with every drop of blood he spilled. In time, the boy who hunted wolves became a general who terrorized entire kingdoms. Brynolf's troops were known for their sheer numbers and brutal discipline. He led armies so vast that when they marched, the sound of their footsteps could be heard for miles. But it was not sheer numbers that made them fearsome. Brynolf believed that the mind was as important as the blade. He was a ruthless strategist, capable of besieging entire cities without breaking a sweat, using only fear as his weapon. Legends say he never lost a battle, and on occasion he defeated armies without even fighting, forcing enemies to surrender just by the sight of his banners on the horizon. His nickname, the Skullbreaker, was not merely symbolic. Stories were often told of Brynolf personally taking to the battlefield, smashing helmets and skulls with his legendary mallet, known as the Dragon's Tooth. This heavy and cruel weapon seemed to reflect the very essence of its wielder, destructive and ruthless. There is one story in particular that fuels the mythology surrounding Brynolf. During the Battle of the Three Fjords, he led a charge against a coalition of 3 rival clans. Despite being outnumbered, Brynolf divided his forces in a risky move that confused the enemy, perfectly flanking them. In the end, all 3 leaders fell to his sledgehammer, and their skulls were hung as trophies in his camp. Wherever he went, Brynolf left a trail of destruction and submission. Villages burned, walls reduced to rubble, and kings humiliated with the legacy he built with each victory. His own soldiers, though loyal, feared him. They said that if someone failed to carry out an order, the punishment was so severe that others would rather face death on the battlefield than disobey. But Brynolf was not just a general. He was almost a living myth, someone who seemed to carry within him the fury of an age that refused to end. And yet even Brynolf, for all his strength and strategy, seemed to have a greater purpose. He fought not just for power or wealth, but for something deeper, darker. His men whispered that he followed the orders of an ancient entity, something he had encountered deep in a dark forest during one of his campaigns. After this event, his thirst for war intensified, and his cruelty reached levels never before seen. What was Brynolf's true purpose? That, not even his most loyal followers dared to ask. He, the Skullbreaker, had always been a man obsessed with maintaining his title as the greatest warrior and strategist the North had ever seen. His appetite for challenge was almost as great as the armies he led, and this made him both admired and feared. During a strategic meeting with his generals, one of the scouts arrived with intriguing news. He spoke of a legendary group of 6 warriors from Valheim whose fame was growing like wildfire. They were called the 6 Barbarians, and were said to be capable of feats that even the oldest legends would hesitate to describe. Brynolf's curiosity was instantaneous. He demanded details about these warriors, who they were, what made them so formidable, and why no one had mentioned their existence before. The generals, though wary, explained what they knew. Valheim, despite being a relatively isolated land, was a place that produced warriors whose strength rivaled that of the gods. The 6 barbarians, in particular, were known for their supernatural prowess in combat. Each possessed unique abilities, and together they were nearly unstoppable. However, they were also mysterious. Few survived to tell detailed tales about them. To Brynolf, this sounded like a worthy challenge. He had no need for riches or additional glory, but the idea that there was a group that could threaten his reputation was unbearable. His pride burned like a flame fueled by the wind. So he decided Valheim would be his next target, not for riches or land, but to prove, once again, that no one, absolutely no one, was greater than the Skullcracker. He began to prepare his spies, sending them to scout the outskirts of Valheim. Meanwhile, in the back of his mind, The thought of facing the legendary barbarians filled him with excitement and a sense of anticipation he rarely felt. Brynolf was not known for hesitating when deciding his next move. Once he had gathered enough information about Valheim, he ordered his men to begin preparations for a campaign. The call echoed across his lands, "Assemble, for we march north." Soldiers from every region of his vast domain answered the call, creating an army so impressive in size that it seemed impossible to resist. Each division was meticulously organized. Experienced archers, disciplined spearmen, and trained swordsmen would all march with the same goal: to subdue Valheim and eliminate any resistance. The journey to Valheim was long and full of challenges. Brynolf's army crossed snow-capped mountains, treacherous rivers, and dense forests that seemed to stretch on forever. To keep morale high, Brynolf made a point of leading the front line, mounted on his intense-eyed black horse, a beast as imposing as its owner. Each stop was an opportunity to reassert his power. His speeches fired his men, promising them not only glory, but the knowledge that they marched alongside an invincible leader. He tolerated no weakness. The few who complained of exhaustion were left behind without hesitation. Finally, after weeks of relentless marching, the army reached the lands of Valheim. The first signs of resistance appeared before they even reached the main gates. The locals, aware of Brynolf's reputation, tried to stop his advance, but were easily defeated. Each village that fell under his siege was a warning to the next. When the army finally came into sight of Valheim, surrounded by dense forests and protective mountains, Brynolf was overcome by a sense of imminent conquest. He ordered the siege, surrounding the city with his forces. Barricades were erected, catapults positioned, and siege towers began to be built. He knew that patience would be essential to take this place, but he also knew that Valheim, strong as it was not prepared to face the might of his legion. Within the stone halls of Valheim, the 6 barbarians gathered around a large, carved wooden table marked with a detailed map of the surrounding lands. Word had reached them of the impending siege, and with it, the colossal size of Brynolf's army. The warriors knew that facing an enemy of this magnitude would require more than brute force. So they used their sharp minds to devise a strategy that would not only stop the Skullcracker, but also prove that Valheim was an indomitable bastion. Each of them brought their skills to the table, fine-tuning every detail of their plan as if it were an axe blade before battle. The strategy they devised was as bold as it was dangerous, a direct, coordinated assault, combining local forces with the superhuman abilities of the barbarians. They knew that Valheim's brute force could not match Brynolf's overwhelming numbers, but they could use the terrain to their advantage. The plan involved luring the enemy army into a strategic area, where narrow valleys and steep slopes would make them vulnerable. Meanwhile, small troops from Valheim would be used as a distraction, causing Brynolf's soldiers to scatter and lose the cohesion of their advance. The barbarians would be the spearhead, leading the most dangerous and decisive attacks, like an unstoppable storm. Preparations began immediately. Local warriors were trained in defensive formations, barricades were erected at strategic points, and supplies were distributed. The 6 barbarians sharpened their weapons, strengthened their armor, and most importantly, steeled their spirits. For them, this was not just a battle, it was a test of who they were and what Valheim stood for. On the last night before they left, they walked among the warriors of Valheim, igniting their hearts with speeches of courage and determination. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, illuminating the valley where the enemy awaited, the barbarians positioned themselves, ready to begin the operation that would decide the future of their land. As the first ray of sunlight broke through the mountains, the silence of dawn was replaced by the thunderous sound of Valheim's catapults. Giant boulders were thrown into the sky, as if Thor's own hammer had struck down Brynolf's army. The first rank of enemy soldiers was crushed before they could even organize themselves, and chaos ensued. Brynolf, however, maintained his cool. He had expected this. With a firm gesture, he ordered his men forward, using heavy shields to form barriers against the projectiles. To him, this was just another battle, and he was determined to prove, once again, why he was known as the Skullbreaker. As the enemy troops organized themselves for a frontal assault, the 6 barbarians began their part of the plan. Split into pairs, they advanced on the flanks, moving with impressive speed and precision. Ragnar and Sigurd, known for their destructive strength, led the charge from the right, using enormous axes to cut through the enemy ranks. The blades sliced through the air and found their targets with brutal precision. On the other hand, Hakon and Frey used the uneven terrain on the left to ambush small divisions of Brynolf's army, eliminating them before they could react. Astrid and Bjorn, the group's strategists, coordinated lightning attacks from the center, destabilizing the front line with calculated strikes and masterfully leading the Valheim warriors. The battle soon descended into absolute chaos. Screams, the sound of swords crossing and the echo of catapults mixed together, creating a scene worthy of legend. At the heart of this chaos, Brynolf stood on the battlefield, crushing his enemies with his immense sledgehammer, a weapon that looked more like a dragon's tooth. He was a force of nature, cutting down anyone who dared to cross his path. However, when his eyes met the 6 barbarians, he knew that the time had come for the true test. He shouted a challenge, his voice echoing like thunder across the battlefield. "Come forth, barbarians of Valheim. Show me what you are made of." The 6 barbarians answered the call without hesitation. They joined forces to face Brynolf directly, surrounding him in a flawless formation. Each of them knew exactly where to be, attacking in unison and taking advantage of any opening he left. But Brynolf was no easy opponent. He counterattacked with almost inhuman strength, forcing the barbarians to fight not only with strength, but also with intelligence and strategy. Astrid led the coordination, observing the enemy's attack patterns, while Ragnar and Sigurd used their brute strength to deflect the most dangerous blows. Hakon, Freya, and Bjorn took the opportunity to strike Brynolf in his most vulnerable spots, slowly wearing him down. The battle between them seemed endless, but Brynolf's resistance began to fail. His army, seeing their leader in trouble, lost morale and began to retreat. With a final blow, Ragnar struck Brynolf's sword, disarming him, while Astrid landed a precise blow to his knee, forcing him to fall. Hakon, with his legendary precision, used his spear to knock off the Skullbreaker's helmet, exposing the defeated look of a man who, until then, considered himself invincible. But instead of killing him, the barbarians decided that humiliation would be a worse punishment. Brynolf was tied up and thrown to the ground in front of his own men. With victory assured, the 6 barbarians and the warriors of Valheim stood triumphant on the battlefield. The ground was strewn with rubble and bodies, but the flag of Valheim flew steadily, symbolizing the resilience and strength of its people. As Brynolf's body lay sprawled across the battlefield, chaos still raged around them. Skullbreaker's troops, overcome by the sight of their feared general defeated, hesitated for a moment. But a moment was all the barbarians needed. Victory over Brynolf did not mean an immediate end to the war. The warriors of Valheim, led by the 6 barbarians, needed to send a clear message. This land would never be taken by force or fear. Ragnar raised Brynolf's blooded mallet and swung it above his head, his cry echoing across the plains like thunder. This act of bravery galvanized the Valheim troops, who advanced with renewed impetus. It was as if the spirit of the land itself had taken hold of the soldiers. At the same time, The 6 barbarians, each taking a flank, coordinated the final offensive. Sigurd, with his brilliant strategy, shouted quick orders, ordering small phalanxes to surround the enemy's most scattered groups, cutting off their escape routes. The scene was one of calculated chaos. Bjorn, the largest of the barbarians, fought his way forward with his immense strength, pushing enemies as if they were dry twigs in a furious wind. Hakon, in turn, demonstrated the deadly accuracy of his spear, striking the remaining leaders of Brynolf's troops. In the center, Astrid fought with a fury that seemed almost divine, her shield cracked but still raised, blocking blows and opening space for lethal counterattacks. However, the battle was not all brute force. Freya and Sigurd led a stealthy attack from the sides, catching by surprise the enemy archers who tried to retreat to a safe position. Ragnar, still holding the defeated general's sledgehammer, used the weapon as a banner, advancing towards the center of Brynolf's army and proclaiming at the top of his lungs that Valheim would never fall. The sight of his comrades in arms coordinating the attack with such precision reinforced the unity of the people of Valheim. They were fighting not only for the 6 barbarians, but for their families, their lands, and their future. At the height of the battle, when victory seemed imminent, Brynolf tried to stand up, even though he was mortally wounded. His willpower was impressive, but before he could raise his weapon one last time, Hakon struck him with a decisive blow. With his final fall, the remaining troops, already in disarray, began to retreat. Some fled hastily to the sea, while others threw down their weapons, begging for mercy. The barbarians were not bloodthirsty killers. They knew that victory was not just about destruction, but about teaching a lesson. The prisoners were spared, with the promise that they would return to their lands and spread the word that Valheim was impenetrable. At the end of the day, when the last remnants of Brynolf's army disappeared beyond the horizon, the barbarians and the soldiers of Valheim gathered on the blood-stained field. The 6 barbarians, exhausted but victorious, looked at each other in silence for a few moments. There was no need to say anything. Glory was written on their faces, and the bond between them was stronger than ever. They had defended their land, their people, and their legacy, facing an enemy that seemed invincible. The night brought celebrations the likes of which Valheim had never seen. Around a massive bonfire, songs were sung, mead was shared, and the deeds of the 6 barbarians were immortalized in the chants of the skalds. Their legends would not only be told, but lived in every corner of the land. And so, Valheim could breathe in peace again, its most loyal defenders not only saviors, but icons of courage, strategy, and unity. The 6 barbarians could finally rest, or, who knows, prepare for the next challenge that the gods would place in their path. Did you like this story? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next epic sagas. The journey continues.